Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Change Physician Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, with my fabulous co-host, Dr. Melissa Cady. And for today's episode, this is the deeper dive into Prelude to Season 2, Part 2. It all kind of rolls off the tongue. Prelude to Season 2, Part 2, where we talked about in the first episode our transition with the Change Physician Podcast. We're ending Season 1. Season 1 will end on June 6th, where we will have our 100th published episode. We have been doing this for a year, which is a big deal because most podcasts don't last this long. And over this last year, we've had amazing guests and amazing host chats where we've talked about individual things. But with Season 2 approaching, we're having a transition back to one. We're going to be doing our Friday faves, which we enjoyed at the beginning, and we transitioned to Monday motivations, and we're going to return to that. We'll talk a little bit of reason about that. And the other one is the personal development focus, or focus on the self, learning the skills, strategies, things that we had mentioned before, these mindsets, but we're really going to do it with broaden the guest pool to experts, people who have actually published on this. They will be doctors, but they may not necessarily be physicians. Other people who have some good wealth and understanding there, where we will then approach this. We'll have an interview with them, and then we will be doing our deep dive episode, just like this one, where we'll talk about the whys, like how did that influence us? And as for each of us, Melissa and I, how did that, what are our big takeaways so that we can learn from each other? We can kind of, again, look at it in many different angles and see, Melissa's going to see things that I didn't see. I might see things that she didn't see. And then it'll bring a little bit more awareness, a little bit more change, a little bit of more understanding there. So that is the first episode. In this one, we're going to talk about our reasons behind what was the thought process of why we're changing the forecast, or the podcast. So Melissa, what were some of your reasons we've done this for a year, we've kind of got the flow going down. What made you want to change?
I would say, first of all, mixing things up every once in a while in any kind of relationship is good. You got to avoid the monotony, the boredom, those kind of things. But when you think about this prior year, a lot of it's been highlighting people that are physicians that have truly changed the trajectory or made simple changes that have just improved their own joy and happiness and satisfaction in their own career or their lives in general. And we've highlighted their stories and listen to the lessons they've learned in hopes that many other physicians will glean something from that so they can apply it to their own lives. And they have resources out there too to, based on what they're doing, that maybe could be a benefit to other physicians. But I think that now, when we really think about, I think there's multiple layers. I call myself the challenge doctor for a lot of reasons. I see change within challenge, literally by the letters, but also just symbolically that we can't build resilience or change anything unless we challenge ourselves to do something differently. But the change physician title to what our podcast is, it's about change. And, for the better is our intention. But who would be better than people who are experts at various things that lead to change or help support change? And there's a lot of psychological aspects to this, and even some basic strategies. A lot of people out there, possibly outside the medical world, that can give some insight, and even based on research, on what is most effective for people once they recognize they want to change, have an awareness on what those things are, but are struggling with making the change. Or sometimes I feel like we help create an awareness that people didn't really think about. So I think that having people that are going to give some guidance, possibly have the ability to help people in an extended way, who knows? But just having those perspectives can help maybe give people a little bit of a 1 foot forward, at least one step in the right direction. And you just never know how that's going to influence. I mean, our hope, I say for myself, is that I hope if we can, at least a few physicians find some aha moments of feeling like they're not alone, first of all, that there's a lot of people that feel a certain way, or that there's hope. If there's a few physicians out there that we make a huge impact on, this has all been worth it. And of course, we learn things along the way. So I think when you give people what you need, which all of us are human, and we all need to, not that you have to, but I personally would like to improve on my own personal development. When you try to give that to others, I feel like you just receive the benefit as well. So I think that, like you said, also having that deep dive episode after we do an interview helps us really kind of really absorb those lessons and maybe reflect on it in a way that helps other people absorb it better too. I think that's kind of where we're at. Your
Yeah.
thoughts? I mean,
Well,
you
yeah.
you pretty much hit it all before I started talking.
Well, I don't know, but from my perspective, what the really the things I'm looking at, and I think the biggest one is probably pure selfishness. And it comes down to anytime you do something like this, a project, it's a grind, folks.
Yeah.
Like uh the
Let's
idea
talk
that you
about
just,
that.
yeah, well you can is what are you doing? You're doing something and you're publishing every day, or not every day, but quite frequently. You have to sit down, you have to meet, you have to carve out time to do it, which of limited. And no one has as much time as they would ever want. um but you have to dedicate that day in and day out of doing it. So what's the reason why you're doing what you do? And no one starts a podcast and the idea is, oh, I'm just going to publish something, and all of a sudden you're going to get 1 million followers and whatever, your life's going to change. That never happens. Like doesn't. Like I like all the stories about, oh, I was an overnight success after 10 years or whatever. So, what is it that one of the things that keeps you kind of driving forward? Well, what is it that what are you getting out of it? And some people, for a lot of either YouTube or podcasts, a lot of people were just exploring topics that were interesting to them. And I think I was interested in connecting a little bit more with physicians with season 1. And I think we were doing that is because outside of scope of this, but I don't think we've ever talked about it, but I have I have some pretty negative perspectives against the medical system as a whole, and many of those I have not talked about for a number of different reasons. But I am just I think I've seen the dark underbelly so much, it has really tainted my view in a lot of ways. And so being able to hear other people who have been in that, or it's given me a better perspective of other physicians, which was really important to me, and a better appreciation, and kind of pulled me back into to seeing physician colleagues in a better light, I would say, versus on some of the stuff that my perspectives I had in the past. Second thing is I am I'm 48, which is this weird sort of transition world.
You're so old.
I know I'm so old, but we
You're
have
older
this,
than me.
you're older than you. You look 10 years younger than me. So,
Whatever.
Uh, but it's a time of perspective change in your life, right? So my kids are older, this, that, you have, I know it's apparently pretty well, they talk about a midlife crisis for a reason, because it tends to happen in your midlife. I hope this is not my midlife, because I plan on living longer than 96. But it's just kind of questioning, well, what's the point of everything? And so for me, I'm really looking forward to talk to people. There's been a number of people that we haven't interviewed for a number of different reasons, or even approached, because of this format of season 1. Season 2, we're opening that up again. And so I'm really excited to talk to some people about some of these important kind of life changes. And we don't have to call it personal development. We can call it personal performance or human performance, because that's the sexier term people will use. Sometimes that gets overly medicalized. And they don't talk as much about the kind of the mental, psychological aspect as rich. But I will tell you, every single professional team out there is approaching this stuff. Every high performance where I know in surgical circles, and you know about this too. In certain surgical coaches, they actually have coaching performance things, because there's a task, a physical task involved. But the preparation, the mental preparation that goes into those physical tasks is as relevant to non-physical tasks as well. So I'm excited to that, to kind of deepen my learning, because I know some, but I definitely could learn a lot more and apply it. And so there's an immediate return on investment for that me. So when we get to talk to these people every week in this kind of format, that's a privileged format.
Yeah.
And so from a pure selfish point, I am just excited to be able to do that. And then on the side, hopefully the audience gets it. You're a fly on the wall. And I can also tell you that when you're a fly on the wall in conversations, you hear things that aren't typically said. They're not going to be ever on the news shows. They're, might be mentioned in a book. But I'm really looking for that raw perspective. And again, from a completely selfish standpoint of I want it for me. So yeah, that's my deeper reason, which is, there's not a lot of altruism in there. But that's okay. So, sometimes we don't have to be 100% altruistic. We have to develop the self before you can, before you lose everything or give it out. And, that comes up in medicine all the time. How many people are like burning themselves out thinking they have to do all this stuff, give, and they don't retain anything, or they're not nurturing that spark within them. And then they burn out. And I don't want that to happen. So,
well, first of all, you should be, I would say that I appreciate your vulnerability to share your bias of the deep, dark underbelly of medicine and the aspects of feeling somewhat selfish in this. But I would have to say that the effort put forth is being created in a benevolent way so that others can benefit. So on that note, I think that's, to be appreciated. Of course, I'm on this journey with you, so of course I would say something like that, right? None of us.
Well, we're not planning we're not. Season 2 isn't going to be about how to dominate and harm your neighbors and
right.
enslave become an evil empire of enslaving people or something. Whatever. That's we're not going to do that. So,
pardon my dust, but this is kind of what you do. If you try to help yourself, but you're lifting up other people up, then everyone wins. So
yeah. Well, it's the crab pot, right? And the whole crab pot analogy.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm picturing it, but you can explain it.
When they
all grab each other and they're pulling each other.
Yeah, and the guys there's a pot of crabs and there's crabs. Guy's walking by and he's looking at him and the one of the crabs is getting the top and it's got the claws and it's coming up and he's like, well, don't you need to knock that guy down? He goes, no, it'll be fine because it's that the crab is just thrusting the lid and another crab grabs the leg with his claw and pulls him down. And he's like, the crabs, every time they see somebody get up, they can notice it and then they'll pull them back down into the pot of the crabs. So you don't have to actually worry. You don't have to have high walls on your crab pot. And that's the exact opposite of your elephants there, because typically that's the way people approach life. And I think we've had some profound examples of that over the last 4 years, where everything it was all this win-lose stuff. If they're winning, it doesn't matter who or what I'm doing. I need to tear them down because obviously that somehow reflects on me or takes away from what I could have. And they pull them down into the crab pot. You don't want to live in the crab pot. So yeah. So I have completely selfish desires, but I'm not going to be pushing people down. It's like, no, this is only for me. We're going to publish it twice a week. So
yes. So that is coming from a place of abundance and a growth mindset, which are both really important things for us to bring up in future episodes. That's super critical because, if you feel like there's a finite amount of resources, which is ironic, it's actually when you live in a more of abundance, the more you give, it actually expands what's available. And there's so many ways you could take that conversation, but
yeah, interesting. And I know that's going to come up over and over and over again in season 2. I've looked at the perspective of surviving versus thriving. Mm-hmm. And that resource limitation kind of viewpoint, or us versus them, me versus you kind of thing, is very much a survival mindset. And when we're in that, if you high distress and your perceptions shift down, you make more reactive, more short-term decisions, very difficult to think long-term. And you would think there must be like an evolutionary reason for it. And the only thing I can make sense is in really, really short, like life or death, maybe kind of situations, it's good for survival, but it certainly doesn't help for long-term thriving. And in this day and age, when we don't have as many of those, certainly not in the United States or most industrialized nations, in most places, I should say, that's actually, there are some situations where that is present. That kind of mindset is actually going to keep you from getting to where you need to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be good to kind of be able to, I don't know, that survival mindset is just sort of built in. It's something that's easy for people to default to. But I think sort of this human performance kind of alternative where you're looking at the future, abundance, growth mindset, et cetera, that takes work. And you have to be and I'm sure there's a couple of people who maybe it comes to more naturally than others, to develop that kind of thriving mindset. That's where this is going to come in. And hopefully if, we have people that are in, not fighting tigers, but if you're in the clinic and you're working 60 hours a week, or, you're feeling these pressures of $800,000 of student loans, which is not unheard of anymore. And changes where you can't, it becomes like almost a literal chain with a big ball in the end because of the way that they've changed it with student loans. And we've indebted entire generations of students now with things that they can't escape from, which it's really indentured servitude in many ways, shapes, or form. But this should be really good, and to move beyond it, because it's so easy to fall into that survival focus. So easy to do, but so dangerous to live there.
That's a list. As you were talking, you kept every sentence you said. I'm like, oh, that one's good. Oh, that one's good. I have my reminder list. These are definitely topics we're gonna have to hit on several times.
All right. Well, I'm excited. Yeah, and we'll have some good guests to talk about them too, because exciting.
Yeah.
Super exciting.
Well, we're definitely going to bring those to you as we can coordinate two physicians and probably some busy people that are researchers or business people or experts and things. So you want to take us out today?
Sure. I will just say,
or do I take you out? Am I taking us out? Or
why don't you take us out?
Okay.
You take us out.
Take us out.
Yeah, take us out.
It's like that anesthesia episode, knock you out.
Count backwards from 10.
Yeah.
I never did that. Did you ever do that?
No.
No, you're just you're gonna get really sleepy.
Oh, my favorite thing to do is just talk about, okay, you're gonna smell some fresh plastic like a beach ball and think of a beach and where would you go? And everyone except for one person loves the beach. And
what happened to the person who did love the beach? What'd they do?
That didn't love the beach?
Yeah.
I said, okay, never mind. Don't think about a beach. How about think about a shower curtain? So it's funny how you tailor the way you talk to patients based on your experiences. But yeah, anyway, so I like to ask questions that are interesting, and then they start tailing off their answer as they fall asleep. And
totally off topic here.
Yeah.
Well, and actually this is not going to be true at all, because anesthesia is not like natural sleep, so there is no real dreaming associated with it. But I was going to just say, so it'd be kind of interesting to kind of talk to people about what when they woke up again, what was the stuff that they remembered?
Yeah.
Do they
sometimes
remember?
I get that.
Ball? Yeah.
So, but they're kind of in a weird place in the recovery room and stuff, and not remembering part of that too. So sometimes I get repeat customers and I kind of get some inkling to understand that, but I don't always have time to do that. So anyway, well, always more topics to talk about later, but especially on our Friday faves, I'm sure we can come up with some cool little topics with the anesthesia world. Everyone finds it so intriguing, I find. But for those of you listening today this would be our episode 90. We're almost in that last 10 on the countdown to 100. Obviously, this is a prelude to season 2 and the why as to why we are doing the shift or the change in the Change Physician podcast for the benefit of all of our listeners and viewers, and including us, selfishly.
And me. Yeah, and me. Don't forget that.
Yes. Exactly. So it's okay. We can be in this together. We join you to be with us. Feel free to click subscribe on any of the podcast venues. You can join our community at thechangephysician.com. And we have some other upcoming episodes to finish out that first 100. And June 6th will be the finale of our season 1. And look forward to some of these changes after June 6th for our episodes, which will include some cool topics with interesting guests and a follow-up deep dive with us, so we all can learn this information much better. So we've enjoyed doing this episode, talking about the changes. It gets us excited, and we hope you will come along for the ride, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.
Stay well, folks.